Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I want to thank you both for being here too, and also thank you for the public service you've already done for this community, the district. It's much appreciated. I know both of you have worked hard in your jobs in the legislature, and it's a tough race. And so we thank you both for running and putting yourself out there to the public. Ms. Harrell, we'll start with you. If you could just tell us what you feel are your 2 or 3 biggest accomplishments while you were in the legislature.
Well, I think probably for the people of Martin County, the #1 accomplishment was bringing the Open Heart Center here. That was a major legislative battle that went on for over 3 years, 4 years really, before we finally accomplished it. We passed the bill once and had to pass it again. But I think for the people in Martin County and also for the patients of the whole area, that was probably the #1 thing I did. I also was very instrumental in starting moving Florida into becoming a leader in seaport security. I think that was a very important issue back before 9/11 when we passed the seaport security bill. That became a major piece of legislation that was duplicated across the country. I think that was extremely important as we went into the 9/11 situation. We were able to draw down from the federal government a significant amount of dollars because we were ready. We had security measures already established for our ports. So that helped a great deal. Also cutting taxes. We did a whole lot during that time frame to cut taxes, both on seniors and savers, getting rid of the intangibles tax. I introduced the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, the reinitiation of that. I think that was a major piece of legislation that really gave taxpayers the right to know what was going on. And we did a lot of, we saved the taxpayers a whole lot of money during that time frame. And we also saved a whole lot of money.
Okay.
We had $8 billion in reserve.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Fetterman,
Yes.
What are the 2 or 3 biggest accomplishments you think you've had during the legislature?
Well, good morning, first of all, and thank you all for having us today. There is no question that, in my opinion, my #1 accomplishment has been standing up to the powers that be in Tallahassee. People are pretty fed up with how Tallahassee works. They're fed up with how Tallahassee has worked for years, and I have not been one of those people who goes along to get along in Tallahassee. We have what I refer to as so-called leadership. People, a very small handful of people in power who make the majority of the decisions in the state of Florida. That's wrong to me. And I have time after time stood up to them, spoken out. I've done my research, and I've pointed out where they're wrong, where they've been hypocrites, and where they have continually wasted money and wasted time, that the people of Florida deserve better. I'm very proud to have helped pass a bill last legislative session, which has eliminated the statute of limitations, both civil and criminal, on children who are victims of sexual battery. Very important bill that I have, excuse me, that I was one of the sponsors of. And last, I am very proud to have co-sponsored and been very instrumentally involved in job growth and job creation. We need that here in Florida. I have supported numerous economic incentive packages, including the most recent film tax credit incentive package to help companies like Digital Domain relocate here, produce their movies here, and hire our local folks into jobs that are good paying, high-tech jobs for the future.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fetterman, being a Democrat and Republican majority, do you feel that you can serve the people of this district well and get some things done for the district, being in the minority?
I absolutely do, and I believe that that's a very important role to play. You know, you can go up and be one of a majority where you're told how to vote, and that is how it works typically with the majority. It happens regardless of, I think, sometimes of which party's in power, but I do believe that with the present majority it works a little more arduously. I've watched them squeeze votes out of people and twist their arms even after they voted one way. I've watched them call a timeout, as they did this past session, twist some arms and get people to change their votes when they called a bill back up for reconsideration. That's unacceptable to me. So I believe, number one, that the people of this district, the people of Florida, expect you to be independent, expect you to be somebody who thinks for themselves, and makes decisions for themselves. You know, it depends on how you value legislative service and what it is that you're looking for. Are you looking for somebody to bring the most pork home? No, I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to be the person that sponsors earmark after earmark, because I don't believe that's what the people of Florida deserve, nor do I believe that's what the people of District 81 want. They want somebody who's going to go up and, number one, do our duty of passing a balanced budget and a responsible budget that doesn't raise taxes and doesn't raise fees or service charges, which are just taxes in disguise. I believe they want somebody who's going to go up and stand up against the power structure that too often doesn't listen to regular working people. And I believe I have done that. I will continue to do that. I've also been very successful at times working across the aisle on good policy measures, like the bill that I just mentioned, like a bail bonds bill that I worked on this past session, which related to pretrial release program, which I believe is, you know, they've gone a little far in terms of their originally intended purpose. I worked with designated incoming speaker for my class, if the Republicans are still in power. Worked very closely with him on getting that initiative done. Hope to be working on it again next year. So I can work across the aisle when necessary for the benefit of Floridians.
Okay. Ms. Harrell, I assume you think you can be more effective for the district.
Absolutely. I think the number one issue facing our state and our local area is jobs. And I can certainly be much more effective in changing the economy, in bringing jobs to this area, in being a job creator, not a job killer. I think we need someone who is going to be able to work with leadership, to be able to accomplish things. Jobs are very important. I walk door to door. I've been out in my red running shoes again and again, and I see homes being foreclosed. I see people without work. I see vacant houses in our neighborhoods. St. Lucie County has a 15% unemployment rate. We have got to create jobs. We need someone there who's a consensus builder, who can reach out to the community, who can reach out to various groups and bring them to the table. That's what I do. Someone who is not an adversarial an adversarial person who's going to be up there fighting all the time. We need someone who can create jobs, who has the experience of being a job creator right here on the Treasure Coast.
How do you propose creating jobs, particularly for this district?
I think the first thing we need to do is continue the diversification of the economy. We began that with Ken Pruitt. We began that by bringing Torrey Pines here. I worked very closely on bringing some of these industries here to the entire area. We need biotech, high-tech jobs. I'm very involved right now in health information technology. We are starting to diversify the workforce in healthcare. Bringing Martin Memorial Health Center here, the Open Heart Center, created a large number of jobs right here on the Treasure Coast. We need to continue to do that. You need someone who can work with leadership, someone who is out there helping to do that and make sure that we are going to create the tax policy, the regulatory policy, and also the spending policy that's going to be in place to incentivize companies to come to Florida, to incentivize new businesses to build and create jobs, and also to help the struggling businesses along. I think tax policy can go a long way in that regard. Regulation, over-regulation deters job growth. And we need to make sure we have a strong workforce. I've been involved in a lot of education issues, and I want to be sure that we continue to have a strong workforce out there. I was part of the beginning of helping IRSC become a state college and to broaden its base and be able to create jobs here on the Treasure Coast. I was part of helping FAU become part of, become Harbor Branch become part of FAU. I think those kinds of things create jobs.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fetterman, what would you do specifically to try to bring jobs to this area?
Just want to check you're done. Excuse me. You know, one of the somewhat disingenuous statements we hear a lot of politicians make is that we, meaning we in the legislature, need to create jobs. And I've heard some folks say that then in the next breath, well, government doesn't create jobs. I agree. Government doesn't create jobs. And so when politicians promise you that they're going to create the jobs, you should be concerned. We need less government interference in our capitalist free market economy than we do more. That's number one. Number two, I believe that government can be instrumental in helping private industry create jobs and creating a regulatory environment that makes it friendly to do so. That creating incentive packages that make companies look at Florida a little more closely when every other state in the Southeast region has a welcome basket and red carpet. Well, what's going to make ours the most attractive welcome basket? I believe we need to create an education system that is not just the best in the nation, but world-class, because we are competing in a global economy. And I believe that some of the steps that have been taken in attempts at education reform have done nothing to actually reform our education system or improve the lot for our children and their future. And I work very closely with all of the folks in our local chambers of commerce, our local economic development entities, the Business Development Board, the Economic Development Council in St. Lucie County, and have very good personal relationships with these people to get that job done. You know, I too have gone door to door since my first campaign, not as long as Ms. Harrell has been, and I commend Ms. Harrell for her time in office and the work that she did for our community. Very first time we met, I walked up to her, and she was running for Congress at that point, and I had announced that I was running for the seat that she was vacating, and I thanked her for her service, and I still do. Service is not easy. Whether you agree with someone or not on their policies, the sacrifices that are made to go to Tallahassee and back and forth, and it's not easy, and I recognize that, and I appreciate her time. But we've also seen that the so-called cooperation with leadership leads to things like $6 million hangars for political supporters of the speaker. Cooperation with leadership leads to numerous questions about how they operate behind closed doors and not in the sunshine. Cooperation with leadership means, you know, $48 million for the Tallahassee Taj Mahal, this massive courthouse with granite countertops and flat screen TVs. All of these items in the budgets that Ms. Harrell voted for. If that's cooperation with leadership, if going along with things like Senate Bill 6, which was nothing more than a Tallahassee takeover of our schools, increasing FCAT-type testing, taking power away from our local governments, and penalizing good teachers, I don't want to cooperate with that kind of leadership. I don't believe we should. I cooperate when it's appropriate, and I go up and I fight when it's appropriate too, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's why the people elected me to office, because I was the new guy. I didn't have all the experience that my opponent then had. I don't have all the experience that my opponent today has. I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. As a former teacher, how would you have voted on Senate Bill 6?
I think Senate Bill 6 was a very difficult bill, and I think I would have worked very diligently to change it. I think I could have been very effective in changing it. I'm a former teacher. I understand that education is the basis on which we develop an educated workforce and make sure that we create jobs. I understand that the most important thing in a classroom is a good teacher. We need to reward good teachers. We need to reward teachers who take that extra step and work with those difficult students, special needs children. I have a special needs granddaughter. I think that is extremely important, and I think I would have worked very diligently to change the outcome of that bill. It would have been a much better bill had I been there. And you know, Mr. Fetterman talks about being standing up, well, and trying and creating jobs and what he's done to create jobs. But when you look at the situation and really the groups out there who are creating jobs, it's small business. It is the little entrepreneur out there going to create jobs. And who is that? That's our chambers of commerce. When you look at his record with the Florida Chamber of Commerce, they see him, they evaluate him. They are doing an independent evaluation. This is not party affiliation. This is not leadership affiliation. And I've had my issues with leadership and stood up to them and fought them at times as well. When I disagree, I'm very vocal in that disagreement. But when you look at an independent group out there evaluating your record, and this is one of the reasons I decided to run again. I was very happy going home with my wonderful 8 grandchildren and enjoying my wonderful husband of 45 years. But when I saw this, and I said, 33% evaluation by the Florida Chamber, and this year, 43%. You know, is this the person I want representing me in this difficult economy with 15% unemployment, when you have the creators of jobs independently evaluating a record, a voting record, and saying he's bottom of the barrel? I mean, the last 120 out of 120.
Okay.
The people of District 81 deserve better.
Ms. Harrell, can you say how you would have voted on Senate Bill 6 as it was passed? Would you have voted for it?
I most likely would not have.
Okay. Mr. Fetterman, you want to respond to the Chamber of Commerce situation?
Thank you. I'd like to respond to a lot of that. Let's deal with, there were 3 main items I'd like to address. One of them, let's get the truth out there. I appreciate that Ms. Harrell claims she was motivated by the so-called independent ranking of the Florida Chamber in running for office against me coming out of her term limit. However, the truth is, Gayle, and you know this, you were in Tallahassee during the committee weeks in 2009, before I'd ever cast my first vote, talking to lobbyists and leadership about running for office against me. Because Senator Negron had already announced that he was running for the seat that Senator Pruitt was vacating, and leadership wasn't supporting you in that. And I had numerous lobbyists and friends and colleagues in the House come to me and say, hey, did you hear Gayle Harrell's running against you? So that happened long before I ever was ranked by the Chamber of Commerce. I think that some of them maybe just couldn't help yourself. Secondly, the idea that the Florida Chamber of Commerce is an independent entity, I do find somewhat comical. And I think it's important that we look at how they rank. You know, they rank things like what I consider true job creation, economic development issues. And I've supported virtually every one of them in this last legislative session. I voted yes on their cost-benefit analysis of legislation. I voted yes on an unemployment compensation extension. I voted yes on limiting property taxes levied on Florida seniors. I voted yes on a bill that was called a bridge bill dealing with comprehensive use plans. I voted yes on all 5 innovation economic development bills, the film and entertainment tax credit, the 2 jobs bill, the space and aerospace infrastructure, and commercialization of a matching grant program. I voted yes on McKay scholarships for children with disabilities. I voted yes on instructional materials for bills promoting electronic textbooks and information technology in the classroom. And I voted for a bill that raises our high school graduation standards. I voted against things that I don't consider job growth and job creation. I voted against a parental waiver that would have required the parent taking their kids to Disney World sign away all of their rights if Disney World does something to hurt that kid. I voted against a massive property insurance bill that would have hiked people's insurance rates out of into the sky. I voted against the CSX giveaway of $610 million for a 61-mile Sunrail that's from one point of nowhere to another point of nowhere. Poinciana to DeLand. No disrespect intended to the people in Poinciana and DeLand. I voted against extending the Florida school voucher program to more folks because it just takes more money out of our already underfunded education system. And what isn't explained, and what Ms. Harrell never takes the time to explain, is the way in which the Florida Chamber both scores people with a double score or triple score the items that I just mentioned that have nothing to do with economic development. When I talk to people on their doorstep, they're concerned about job growth. They're not concerned about these issues. These are not the issues of small business. These are the issues of a Tallahassee special interest that are hired guns. The Florida Chamber's hired lobbyists for a handful of large mega corporations. They don't represent our local businesses. Look at the agenda of our local business that was brought to me this legislative session, the 2010 St. Lucie County Chamber of Commerce legislative agenda. I believe I have a 99 or 100% voting record on this right here. These are our small entrepreneurs. These are our local business people. These are the people who I care about when I stand up in Tallahassee, not the Walmarts of the world.
Okay.
If I may just finally address the Senate Bill 6. I appreciate that Ms. Harrell would have tried diligently to work to change the bill. I find that somewhat disingenuous from the point of view that from its filing to the time it was voted on in the House of Representatives, there was not a single amendment to the bill. Not a single amendment was allowed to the bill. I don't believe she would have been able to change it.
Okay, thank you. If both of you would keep your answers a little bit shorter, we'd appreciate it. We don't have a whole lot of time here. We want to get as much information out of you as we can. Mrs. Harrell, on the questionnaire you were asked concerning Amendment 7, which is on the ballot in November. Obviously, it's not on the ballot. It's been taken off. But you indicated support for it, but did not say why. Could you explain why you would be for Amendment 7?
Well, I think we need to make sure that we have fairness in how we're redistricting. And I think that dealt with some issues that perhaps 5 and 6 were creating. And it would have made sure that we had fairness as we move forward in redistricting. I think it's very important that we make sure that everyone in the state of Florida is represented fairly.
You don't think Amendments 5 and 6 would do that?
Well, I think there were some glitches in that would have created, that would have cleared up. I don't have them in front of me, so it's hard for me to comment specifically. But there were some specifics in those that created some problems and needed some clarification.
Mr. Fetterman.
Our Supreme Court of Florida declared that Amendment 7 was unconstitutional. Similar challenges were brought to Amendments 5 and 6. No such challenge was upheld. Those amendments are on the ballot because the Florida Supreme Court ruled on them as constitutional. Amendment 7, which was lambasted by virtually every editorial board of every newspaper in the state, and Amendments 5 and 6, which have been endorsed by virtually every editorial board in this state, the Fair Districts Amendment. Amendment 7 sought to eviscerate what Amendments 5 and 6 are trying to do. Look, Florida's legislature is woefully out of whack. It does not reflect the people of Florida. Florida is a purple state. It's nearly straight down the middle, half Republicans, half Democrats, with a whole lot of folks who just don't care about party anymore, right in the middle. And our legislature doesn't reflect that. All that Amendments 5 and 6 seek to do is have a legislature and congressional delegation that reflects the makeup of the population of the state of Florida. If there's a majority Republicans, the legislature should look that way, as should our delegation. If it's a majority Democrats, the legislature should look that way. If it's 50-50, the legislature should look that way too. That's what Amendments 5 and 6 do. The court declared that Amendment 7 would have eviscerated that attempt, and that's why they held it unconstitutional, and why I can't believe that anybody would support it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fetterman, what are your thoughts about the Tea Party in Florida?
You know, I'm not sure when you say that, and I'm not trying to parse words with you, but I'm not sure if you're referring to the actual registered political party that is the Tea Party, or if you're referring to the kind of overall movement, and that's part of the issue.
I'm referring to the movement.
Okay. I agree with them on a number of things. You know, I had an interesting thing happen to me after the legislative special session on Sunrail. We had a Martin County delegation meeting. I was flanked by Senator Negron on one side and Representative Snyder on the other, two Republicans with whom I work closely. I have good working relationships with. And I was the chair of the delegation last year. And During the public comment period, a gentleman named Art Arginio, who was a former representative and candidate, another guy named Brian Longworth, a Republican, I believe, state committeeman, and both of them active in the Tea Party movement, came up to the podium and said, Representative Fetterman, we'd like to thank you for your fiscal responsibility in voting against the Sunrail package. And Senator Negron and Representative Snyder, we'd like you to explain yourselves. Now, they say politics make strange bedfellows. Those were not folks that I ever expected, laudatory congratulations from. But I received them because no one has a lock on putting an end to wasteful spending. And that element of the Tea Party movement, I fully agree with. Whether it's in Washington, D.C., where I have seen time and again for the last 2 years that we've plugged our Florida budget gaping holes with borrowed money from Washington, D.C., and in the next breath they've criticized Washington, D.C.'s profligate spending. I have a problem with that, number one. And I believe time and again we continue to see pet projects snuck into budgets that are unacceptable. I am in concert with the Tea Party movement's beliefs about that. The stuff about the birthers, that President Obama is a Muslim, the radical social conservatives within that movement, I don't tend to agree with those folks. But from a fiscal policy, I often do.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Harrell.
Yes, I have a lot in sympathy with the Tea Partiers. I share their frustration with what I see happening in government. When you see the liberals out there, such as my opponent, really spending and going forward, presenting bills that are going to really bankrupt this country. We've spent over $1 trillion in the last year. The stimulus package alone was $787 billion. It is absolutely ridiculous when I see what government is doing. Government needs to listen to the people. That's why I go door to door. That's why I knock on people's doors and talk to them. And let me tell you, the frustration out there with this whole liberal agenda that government is moving towards, the takeover of our whole system, is really very difficult. And people are frustrated. I have a lot of sympathy with them. What I really am very concerned about is when you see the Democrat Party in Florida creating a fake Tea Party to try and trick voters. We had a Tea Party person try and file in this race. And I truly believe that that was a move to take conservatives away from Gayle Harrell. So I have a real problem with that. I think the movement itself, I have a lot of sympathy for those people, and I share their frustration.
I must ask the opportunity to respond to some of those items. Number one, there is a write-in candidate in our race. I don't know who he is. I've never had anything to do with it. Number two, I've been waiting to see how long it would take before Ms. Harrell started calling me names and calling me a liberal. And a liberal introducing spending, presenting bills that are spending. I've not introduced a single bill that had any significant financial impact. Furthermore, I've voted against both budgets in the state of Florida since I've been in office that, in my opinion, spent irresponsibly, raised taxes on working people, raised taxes on our small businesses. We saw it in 2009 when they increased the fees for vehicle registrations. If you didn't get your car re-registered before September of 2009, you paid an extra $100 or more. And I heard from more constituents about that than anything else. I voted against the 2009 budget because of that. Meanwhile, my opponent, while in office for 8 years, voted for every single budget that came before the legislature, a budget that doubled in size from the high 30 billions to the high 60 billions in dollars over 8 years. Further, during her time in office, she voted in favor of a nearly $780 million combined tax increase in the state of Florida. And I will happily get you the backup material on that this afternoon. Last but not least, we hear about this spending, and I'm as fed up as anybody with what goes on in Washington, D.C. I am not happy with the performance with regard to certain things of the Obama administration or with the United States Congress, both parties and how they behave. But I find it disingenuous when I hear Ms. Harrell talk about my spending, which frankly I've spent very little, if anything, because I haven't approved any spending, and yet I see $350 million in earmarks that she introduced and sought during her time in office over 8 years. That's irresponsible, and that's, quite frankly, misrepresenting our records.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to respond if I might.
No, it's not a debate, so let's
Well,
go on to
I
something.
do feel it's necessary to really say that, first of all, I didn't mean to imply that he introduced them. There were many Democrats who introduced bills, so I want to make that clear. However, he did not vote for the budget, which, by not voting, created an increase in his salary. So if you can't have it both ways.
Okay, fine. Thank you. All right. Mr. Fetterman, how would you rank your constituent services?
I think I'm one of the best in the legislature, if not the top 10. It's one of the things that I've prided myself on. I meet people in the grocery store, out in the grain and tradition where I live, numerous times who we've helped with everything from making sure that their unemployment check is arriving on time because they're having such a difficult time wading through the system because they've never been in the system before and they just don't know how to do it, to, quite frankly, a woman gives me far too much credit for it, but helping a woman get a heart transplant. I mean, when a woman named Jessica Stazer her husband called my office because she had a massive heart failure. We helped her not only get qualified for Medicaid. She was a realtor who lost her health insurance, and you know, it's kind of tough to be a realtor these days, and helped get her transferred to Shands. First time I met her in person, she walked up to me and she told me I was her angel and that I'd helped save her life. I thought she gave me too much credit, but that's the degree to which we will go. I have two wonderful, incredible staff people, Tom and Gabby, who will move mountains for people. Unfortunately, there's a lot of red tape in government, and the degree of red tape is unacceptable to me. We as legislators have a different phone number to call than the constituents do. That's unacceptable too. But that's presently how it works. I hope to be able to change that. But in the meantime, when someone calls my office, we do everything we can to help them with their problem and more.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Harrell, how would you rate your past constituent services?
I think that was my #1 priority, is serving my constituents. And I worked very, very diligently during my term in office to do that. We had an incredible experience in helping individuals, whether it is getting their child support issues straightened out. Dealing with the Department of Revenue was extremely difficult. That's probably the #1 issue I had come to my office, was helping single moms and child support. We have a lot of deadbeat dads out there. And working with domestic violence victims, I introduced and passed legislation to make sure that they had insurance. I worked very closely with a lot of our child advocate groups, being part of Hibiscus Children's Center. I think that was a real concern for me, is helping our children who are abused. And we worked very diligently with many agencies, with many individuals in situations. As far as helping individuals, that was the my #1 object as part of the legislature, was to help individuals and help my constituents. My whole life has been about service to our community. I've spent 39 years here building a long resume of assisting people. It's who I am. It's what I've done. It's central to my goal in life, is to be a servant for people.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Harrell, do you support term limits?
Yes, I do.
But you could be serving again if you go back.
Yes, I will be serving again, and I will bring a great deal of experience with me. I was out of office for 2 years, very happy to be with my grandchildren and to be with my wonderful husband. But the situation, I feel, is very critical in this economy where we've got to create jobs. We need a job creator up in Tallahassee, not someone who's going to stymie things and be a job killer. And I had so many people come to me and ask me to run again. And I finally decided, really with a lot of prayer and thought and consideration, that I would do this again. I think I can be very effective. I bring a lot of experience to the office and will be able to be very effective in being a voice for the people of the Treasure Coast.
But you support term limits.
Yes, I do, and I was out of office for 2 years. I am not the incumbent.
I understand that. Mr. Fetterman, do you support term limits?
I wholeheartedly do for everyone. And I just heard that Ms. Harrell supports term limits, but that they don't apply to her. Look, most people get the joke. You're term limited, you sit out for a term because you didn't get the promotion that you asked for, and then you try to come back, that's still thwarting the will of the people. The people voted to change the law and ask for term limits of their legislative representatives, as rightfully they should. Nobody should get too comfortable in these seats. And you surely don't get too comfortable in them when you're running for office every 2 years. But to have someone come out and say that they support term limits, sit out for 2 years, and then try to come back to the very same seat they represented for a full 8-year term, I find quite incredulous.
Okay, thank you. Other questions, please?
I had two. Joe Negron in the last session proposed a bill with the children's services and the taxing. Did you oppose or support that? I'll start with Mr. Fetterman.
The bill itself, the initiative I opposed. The ultimate result was a compromise bill that the Children's Services Council people came to me and said, we work this out. And it was contained within another bill that had other funding mechanisms for children's issues, and I ultimately supported that. I was not in support of, nor do I believe that Senator Negron's perceived, I don't believe he necessarily intended it, perceived attack on Children's Services Council is a good thing. I do believe that the work that our Children's Services Councils do in our communities are fantastic. They are accountable, significantly accountable.
But the bill itself, then, you supported the final?
The final version I did vote for, yes.
And not the first
Exactly.
version. And Ms. Harrell, your thoughts on that?
I was part of the movement to start the Children's Services Council here in Martin County. I am so supportive of them and believe that they are essential to providing the absolutely needed services to our children. So I was very dismayed over the bill as it originally stood, and was vocal in my dismay about that. I spoke with many people about it and encouraged people to really speak with Senator Negron and to work within our local system and our local services council, children's services councils here on the Treasure Coast, to make sure that there were changes put in place. You know, I have concern about even how it passed, because it does put it before the voters to be voted on every 8 years. That uses a lot of resources that could go to children, instead of having to go out and sell yourself again. I think I would have, if you really need to reinstitute every so often, we have constitutional amendments presented by a commission every 20 years. That gives a longevity that you can look and see how things work. If you want to have the voters vote on it, I would use that same pattern that we use for constitutional, for revamping our whole state constitution.
Thank you. Just one more question from me, and it's really for Ms. Harrell. On most cases, not all, but most cases, when a case is made to remove an incumbent, it's because the incumbent has been ineffective. Can you cite an example or two where you think Representative Fetterman has been ineffective?
Yes, I can. And I would give you your own article by Jim Turner, where you really indicate how effective someone has been. Main bill sponsor 6, bills passed, key achievements none. You know, I think we need someone on the Treasure Coast who can really get things done. If you compare my first 2 years in the legislature with his first 2 years, I was extremely effective. And I didn't always agree with the leadership. I am not a toady for the leadership. I have learned over 8 years how to get things done in the legislature. When you have someone here who is not able to get anything done, we deserve better. When you look at his record on job creation, when you look at his rankings This is in a time when we are facing
Understood.
huge unemployment here.
Thank you. You answered that for me. I appreciate it. And Mr. Fetterman, you cited before bills that you've supported in the past, but can you cite for us what you think has been, again, your most effective effort as a representative the last 2 years?
Standing up to the hypocrisy in Tallahassee. You know, I speak to Jim fairly often. I think he's a nice guy. I disagreed with how he portrayed that in that article. I thought it was somewhat irresponsible. I know you're not supposed to argue with people who print newspapers and buy ink and barrels, but I just thought it was wrong. There's not a single constituent, working person in my district on whose door I've knocked who said, how many bills did you pass this year? There's 99% of the bills that get introduced in Tallahassee and even get passed are, for the most part, special interest giveaways that do nothing to benefit the regular Joe and Jane on the street. What they do is they work to tweak some element of the law to help some special interest group. We have one constitutional mandate in the state of Florida for the 60 days of the legislative session. That is to pass a budget. And that is to pass a responsible budget that doesn't raise taxes on people and finds a way to function government more efficiently. We haven't done that once since I've been in Tallahassee. And I find it, quite frankly, the scorecard on whether or not you passed a bill, a little silly.
Thank you.
I have one question. Representative Snyder has introduced or is drafting legislation that would give law enforcement broader powers for illegal immigration, cracking down on it. How do you feel about that legislation? I'll leave it at that. Representative Fetterman.
Sure. I have a very close working relationship with Representative Snyder. I'm the Democratic ranking member of the Criminal and Civil Justice Policy Council, of which he's the chair. We work well together. We both have he's a long and storied law enforcement background, and I'm the general counsel for the sheriff in St. Lucie County. I have not read Representative Snyder's bill that he's discussing. I have read the Arizona legislation upon which it's based. The first version of the Arizona legislation was quite problematic. The second version, the version that was ultimately tweaked and passed, I have far less of a problem with. My biggest concern about it, I don't know that it addresses the problem. We have a serious problem of illegal immigration here in the state of Florida and in this nation. We don't have the extent of the problem that they have in places like Arizona and Texas, but the problem is significant here. One of my greatest concerns is the additional burden that this places on our local law enforcement without any additional help in the cost. You know, time and again we see unfunded mandates come down from Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. that puts a burden on ever-shrinking local government budgets, ever-shrinking local government personnel forces. That's my biggest concern about Arizona-style immigration. My other concern is, and we saw this, I've seen this happen in the legislature. Certain powerful groups, including the Tallahassee-based Florida Chamber of Commerce, continue to oppose real immigration reform that gets at the heart of who's responsible for it, and that is businesses that hire illegal immigrants. You know, during the Sunrail debate, we brought forward, and the Chamber opposed, both an E-Verify amendment to the Sunrail bill, as well as an amendment that would have required, it was my amendment, 75% of all jobs created and hired and paid for out of the state treasury go to Florida residents. And those bills were defeated. Those amendments were defeated, and they were opposed by the Chamber. That makes me wonder where their priorities are. Is it about truly fixing our broken immigration system, or is it about pandering to a certain element of the population who votes?
Thank you. Ms. Harrell?
Yes, actually I was very involved in trying to stop illegals from coming into the state and being part of our workforce long before it was cool. You know, I think I had introduced a bill back several years ago dealing with illegal immigration. This is a huge burden on our state. We have over 1 million, or close to 1 million, illegals in the state of Florida. And we have got to deal with it. I have not had the opportunity to read Representative Snyder's bill. In concept, I am very much attuned to it. And I was certainly in favor of the second bill that came through the Arizona. I did read that one, and I was supportive of that. I think you need to take a comprehensive approach for that, to the whole problem. I have been a co-sponsor of E-Verify for years and have fought diligently to try and get that passed. And I will be an advocate in the legislature to really do everything the state can do. This is truly a federal issue. You've got to stop this whole problem at the state. Number one, you have to close the border. You've got to get the federal government to stand up and stop allowing illegals to come into this country. Then you really need to make sure that you have the ability to hold employers accountable. If you stop the job magnet, you can really do a whole lot to stop illegal immigration. And then you really need, at the federal level, to address the situation we have in immigration and have immigration reform that doesn't give amnesty but does allow for legal immigrants. I am not against immigration. I'm against illegal immigration. And there's a whole lot that needs to be done at all levels. But the state does have some responsibility in this, and some things the state can do in it.
Thank you. Other questions? All right. I would like each of you to wrap up. Let's give you 2 minutes, and which is a very short amount of time. But we've been over a lot, and we do appreciate your time. Ms. Harrell, we'll go with you first. If you would just give us 2 minutes of why you think you're the best candidate for this job.
Well, I'm Gayle Harrell, running for District 81, and I think that our number one issue facing this state is our economy and creating jobs. I think I am the person that has the experience as a small business owner. I've owned a mammogram center. I've run a medical practice. I'm now involved in bringing health IT jobs into the state of Florida. I know what it is to make the bottom line and to help create jobs. I think it's important that we have someone in Tallahassee who's going to have the leadership, the consensus building skills to reach out to the business community, the people who are the job creators, and make sure that we diversify the economy of Florida, that we have a tax policy in place that is going to incentivize businesses to come to Florida, new businesses to come in, be created, and also existing businesses to expand. I think I have the experience to do that. I also have the legislative background to do that. While in the legislature, I worked on job creation issues. I did a bill that helped diversify our economy by using our universities as the ability to use their innovation and commercialize it. That's job creation. That's going to bring high-tech, biotech, high-paying, high-wage jobs to Florida. I am not a job killer, and my opponent really, when you look at his record, is. And I think there's a real distinct difference when you have an independent group who does the evaluation. And it's not just the Florida Chamber, it's the Florida Home Builders. He was next to last with the Florida Home Builders Association, with Associated Industries. It's across the board. People who are out there building jobs, helping to diversify our economy and create a vibrant economy, evaluated him. I think we need someone who is going to be able to work up there. Bring people to the table. That's what I do best. I bring a diversity of people to look for solutions. I'm a solution-oriented person. It's not a matter of party. It's a matter of finding the right solution that's going to really deal with the complex, complicated issues we have in the state of Florida. And I feel that I am the very best candidate to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Fetterman.
You know, I'm not running for office as a consolation prize because I didn't get promoted to the office that I wanted. I'm running for office because I'm tired of the games in Tallahassee. I'm tired of the fact that working people don't have a voice. And I'm tired of everybody sucking up to the big Tallahassee special interests. It's time for somebody to stand up for regular people. It's time for somebody to stand up for the people whose doorstep I spend every Saturday and Sunday afternoon and sometimes after work during the week. They don't care about rankings by special interest groups. They care about the fact that someone's going to stand up to the status quo. If you're happy with how things are going in Florida right now, you should vote for my opponent. If you're not happy with how things are going in Florida right now, if you want somebody who's going to tell the powers that be that what you're doing is unacceptable, when you keep raising my taxes, keep making it harder for me to find a job, keep spending money on edifices to the judiciary that are unacceptable, and AstroTurf for a flag football field as a giveaway to a speaker, and airplane hangars and what have you, if you're tired of that, and you want somebody who's going to fight against that, fight to create real jobs that works with our local business leaders, not some lobbyist in Tallahassee, then I'm that guy. I'm Adam Fetterman. I'd love to continue to have the opportunity to represent the people of District 81.
Thank you. Thank you both.